We are live here on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is Tony Vicente. I'm Chief Alchemist here at Plus One EXP, which is a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop game design, beard and skincare alchemy, and the Bardic College of Content Creation. Our hope and desire is to help amazing designers connect with amazing players. And we do that in a lot of different ways, but hands down, my favorite one is sitting down with one of those designers to talk to them about their work and their habits of play. Today we are sitting down with Josh. Josh, why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, and where they can find you online?
Sure. First, just thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Josh. I run a blog called Rise Up Comus, and I publish games under Rise Up Comus. You can find my stuff both on itch and ttrpg.
Awesome. And we've got links to that right down below Josh's well-bearded face.
Your mic.
That's awesome, because you know what? Everybody else can still hear me, I think. Audience, if you can't hear me, let me know. For whatever reason, Google doesn't like my microphone. Everything's going to look weird for a second.
Technical difficulties are something that I'm no stranger to. Let's just Google. The audience can hear you. I can't.
Google. You've got
maybe I can fix that.
Schmuggity Doogle. No, it's me. You can't hear me right now. This is so much fun. All right. And we're back. No, I don't think it's anything you can. Yeah, I know, Blake. It's because I was fixing things. I think there's going to be anything you can do, and every time it goes wrong, I'm going to have to hop in and fix it. Probably it's going to be super fun. But that does mean whatever it is not a hardware issue, like I was thinking earlier, and we were talking about before stream. It means it's a Google issue, and I won't have any control over it one way or the other until they eventually run a patch that inherently changes something else horribly also too. You blog, you design,
I blog.
You do all the things. Tell us a little bit. Let's go back to that. Tell us who you are one more time.
Sure. My name is Josh. I blog under the name Rise Up Comus, and I also publish games under that name. You can find my games on itch and DriveThruRPG.
Awesome.
I also have a podcast called Wizards and Wagons and Taverns and Flagons, and I should plug those guys too.
Awesome. And I was saying right below your handsomely bearded face, we have links to both your blog as well as your itch.io store. I got to ask first off, what is Rise Up Comus?
Some people think that they have a good sense of or a good taste in music, and I for sure know that I don't. My favorite musical genre is psych folk, which existed for about 5 years in Britain in the 70s. And I love that stuff. There's a band called Comus, and they have a song called Song to Comus, and the refrain is Rise Up Comus. Comus is a character from mythology. He is the son of Bacchus, and the band derived their name from a John Milton poem about him.
So just, a common piece of pop culture knowledge. Everybody be familiar with it. No deep cuts here.
Well, no, exactly. It's just I like niche music, and when I sat down, I was like, "Oh, I need to write about elf games. People need my opinion." It was the first thing that came to mind. No special reason.
That's awesome. Let's talk about that. So you were blogging, but that inherently kind of means you were playing, right? So how did you get started playing elf games?
Yeah. Well, I was 12. It was the 90s. And I maybe other people about my age can remember, the way that the Satanic Panic kind of gripped my family and the community. So, I was told that it was that D&D was a direct line to Satan tool. But little did my parents know that me and all of my friends loved it. And we would play secretly with stolen materials. A cooler friends had RPG books, and we would Xerox the pages. So I had one half of a Shadowrun book and the player creation chapter of AD&D, and yeah, we just like we really had to do a lot of DIY ethos to get a game going, but we played all the time, and I've been doing that sort of thing ever since.
Which is funny because there is a reality, like there's like the Satanic Panic did kind of return in some ways us to the early days of D&D when it's like, okay, who's got this copy of this magazine that has this article in it that we are piecing this game together from? Can everybody make their carbon copies and send them in to like Alarms and Excursions so that they can staple bind them together and mail them out? Like the community sourced reality for teenagers whose parents wouldn't buy them RPGs is high. Like my mom was always like, oh, they were just, I grew up in the South in the US, and they were like, oh, they're just out of those books every time I go to the store. I don't know what's happening. Like, I don't think was ever willing to confront me on like, I just don't want you playing this game. And I was an adult before I realized there's no way that the game store that made its money largely selling D&D hobby supplies was ever out of those books. So, and why I never just said, Mom, let's all go together. I don't know. Cause I didn't realize my mom was lying to me. And you know
so
what?
Deceitful.
That's the lies are the real Satanic Panic. You know, that's what I'm saying. No, I love that. So what edition did you kind of come in? Was that third edition?
It was AD&D. I was a little bit before then.
Oh.
But I mean, I think that a lot of the way that I approach games was based on the fact that I wasn't just introduced to D&D. You know, my friends, the cool friend, he had Fading Suns, and he had Ars Magica, and he had Shadowrun. So I was introduced to the hobby as a hobby, as like there are a lot of games to play. Let's try and play them instead of just like, oh, I play D&D and what's another game? I don't know. The idea that there's like a lot of games that do different things and they feel different, kind of like texturally at the table, and you like something about one thing and you like another thing about something else. Like all that stuff was pretty early on for me.
Awesome. And we even talked a little bit before we went live. Like that's kind of still your design ethos, right? Like you're like, hey, here's the thing I want to talk about now. Here's where I want to design. Here's where I want to look at. Here's what I want to explore. And that's what you write about. And that's what you design. You kind of pull from all these different places. What kind of took you when you started blogging at some point? What made you think I really need a blog?
Oh, geez. Overinflated sense of self-importance, I guess. I was I started the blog 6 or 7 years ago now, and 6 or 7 years ago there was talk about something that Google did wrong and bonked everything up. They got rid of G+, the only place that had ever had like a civil conversation with RPG people the OSR movement was happening, and I was reading these blogs by people that I was flabbergasted at their brilliance, ideas that I would have never had, right? You know, I've been playing RPGs my whole life and I loved them. And I play them all the time. And these people were playing a type of game that I was excited about and I wanted to play, and I wanted to talk about my experiences doing that. And, as that community of bloggers had ideas, they were passed around, and people would like cross out one word and like write another word above it. And there's this like discourse happening between blogs, right? You could see these ideas travel across Blogspot, and I just wanted to indulge in that a little bit.
Love it. Yeah, and let's get an F in the chat for Google Plus. As Guy Kawasaki said, it's like Switzerland. Everything is beautiful, everything is well designed, and no one is there.
Yes.
So, I love Google Plus so much that I read a Guy Kawasaki book about Google Plus, and I've committed parts of it to memory.
I've read a Guy Kawasaki book before, but I haven't read that one. I didn't even know he had written one. That's very him, isn't it?
It was a very quick turnaround. It was about exploring. I mean, it's very Guy stuff. Like it's about a space to explore your passions, a better way to connect. Why he thought it was. I mean, and it was really like he could see the writing on the wall. Like this was not going to be a sustainable platform because of lack of cohesion. And a lack of user base, and I think it was the attempt to be like, if you don't like where other social media is headed, here's a big empty space that you can at that point relatively easily access because they had moved off weird invitation stuff that they had done early on. Man, if only we had heeded the words of Kawasaki, maybe life would be different. But yeah, no, I didn't actually ever discover that there was RPG stuff happening on Google Plus. I used it for entirely different things, which I think is a good sign of like how segmented Google Plus was and how specific of an experience you could have from it. But that's not. This is not a Google Plus stand show yet.
Not yet.
It does come up a lot. Maybe one day. Maybe Guy, if you're out watching and you want to come on and talk about Google Plus, whole bunch of people would love to have that dialogue with you. We can reminisce about the old times. I love that statement about like the conversational reality that you would see. Like here would be a theme that would come up, and here's one person's take on it. Here's another person's take on it. Here's somebody responding to those two takes in tandem and synthesizing something more out of it. And in a lot of ways, like this has always been something we see in the RPG space. Like even to say that like. Gygax created Dungeons and Dragons is such a misrepresentation of what was happening in the local scene at that time of all these people playing tabletop role-playing games and one person saying, what if I took all this stuff and put it in a book? What if I designed something around that? And what if I had somebody else come in and fix all the problems that I made in that after the fact? Like that's a lot of what happened. And I still love that is a huge part of what we see both in the blog space and like for RPGs as well as in the RPG scene for indie and small press to this day. Even in larger press, it just looks so much different. And so you were blogging. Is that around the time you started designing also, or were you just blogging initially?
Well, back to, my earliest days, like the very first thing I did when I learned that RPGs were a thing, somebody was like, hey, here's some dice. Let's make you a character and we'll, you can be an elf. I was like, oh, cool. I get it. I never played a campaign and I never read, a real book. It was just like Xerox pages. I went home and I opened up a notebook and I was like, I'm gonna write an RPG. And I wrote Lord of the Rings at the top and I started writing a Lord of the Rings RPG. It was terrible. But like I didn't stop doing that thing. So whenever, I was playing games, home games, I was running games that I had written. And my friends were very indulgent and generous and nice to do this with me. And at some point, when I saw other people in the blogosphere, right, like start putting out these winning, beautiful games, just them, right? Like they did everything. They did every part of it. I thought, maybe I can clean up some of the games that I'm running every week and, put a little section in the front and publish it so that somebody else might be able to read it instead of just me and the 5 or 6 people I play with.
And when is that game finally coming to a crowdfunding platform near us? That's the real question everybody wants to know now is, and I actually am, somebody else had posted it up a while ago. Like they found their old first when they were a teenager RPG. And I was like, man, if you just scanned that in and printed it out on paper and put it up on itch or, crowdfunded it for printing, I would buy your first bad RPG just because I would love to see more designers go back and be like, here's the first thing I did. It was horrible and I'm not going to change anything and you're welcome.
Well, in this terrible instance, I think Tolkien Enterprises would have something to say. But I mean, I will also like just double down.
We can judge that part of it a little bit. And so it'd be like, Rise Up Comus, not a Lord of the Rings RPG.
Exactly.
And just do a line through every single name that's an IP, and so it'd be like it's not this character. No, I like I said, I'm always so enthralled by that idea. Like my first games that I designed were like akin to LARPs, though they were not LARPs.
Mhm.
And that's not because I'm down on LARPs. I just want to be very clear. Like, I started out in like pro social gaming and imagination games that were go run around in the woods,
Mhm.
not RPGs or board games. And then it was board games for a while before I even sat down to try to do an RPG. And so I came to the actual design aspect like much later for that. But so much of what I did early on in those imagination games were just the exact same thing you're doing at a table. And it was more what we would now call FKR like type stuff,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but no, I love it. Like I said, I've always been super intrigued by the design work you did. Like Name This Alchemical book and Dungeon Seeds and other little pieces like this are always things that have caught my eye, and I love the distinctive and unique ways I feel like you approach a lot of the design space that you operate in. And we were talking about this right before we went live, but there was like you had posted up Underhill by Water earlier. It's this try to travelogue game, and I have a travelogue game in drafts since forever that I love, and I'm always looking for ways to make travel better in RPGs, and to the point
Mhm.
where I want when you're traveling to be like, this could be the game itself. If I just did
Mhm.
this, this is what I would want to be doing, and this is what I would want to get into. And I feel like you do a lot of pieces where you're like, here's a thing I want to be better. I'm going to make
Mhm.
a set of procedures and a small little game or gamified process around this. And so I'm super excited to kind of dive into that. But before we do, let's talk about Glog. And so
Okay.
because you have some Glog stuff on your site, um, you and Sam are the only two regular Sam Sorensen, the only two
Mm.
regular Glog enthusiasts that I talk to. And so, as for enthusiasts, as far as I know, maybe you hate Glog and you're just like,
No.
I can't get out of my head. For people who have never heard of Glog, why don't you tell people what Glog is from your understanding? You can get things wrong if you want, and tell us a little bit about why you love it so much or hate it, whatever.
Sure. I mean, so I think all of this is, feeding on the answers I gave earlier. GLOG stands for the Goblin Laws of Gaming. It is written by Arnold K. He runs a blog called Goblin Punch. And when I said that, people were blowing me away in the blogosphere with their the sheer creativity, Arnold is one of those people that did that. Just reading through his blog uh, gave me ideas about games that I hadn't had previously, and it's his home rule set. It is extremely hackable, and there is a very abundant community of people that are hacking it all the time. Their Discord goes wild. So when I just have an idea and I want to get it out of my head, like what about this? How do you make lore interesting? What if you did magic with an Earthsea bend? And I just got to get it out of my head to like look at it and have it on a piece of paper and evaluate it. It is really easy to write for the blog because it is a very simple but robust system.
I love it, and like the article that specifically caught my eye is the Rat Kabob edition that you have on your site, because I am a huge Delicious in Dungeon fan.
Hmm.
Like my kids are Delicious in Dungeon fans. We are a Delicious in Dungeon household. We don't want any of those other games. Get out of here. And so I even have a game that's further along than Draft that is a fantasy Michelin kitchen, but instead of a
Nice.
refrigerator, you have a magical portal that takes you down into a dungeon to get all the supplies you need to come back up and to cook your menu for the night. But then your kitchen works kind of like a cruise sheet and blades also too, where you can slowly get better and increase your standing in the fantasy kitchen world. Because if you ever read the French kitchen hierarchy names, they
Mm.
sound like RPG classes.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
so reading Delicious in Dungeon and then reading the French hierarchy thing, I was like, yeah, this is a thing, and we're gonna do it. And
Awesome.
so, but tell us a little bit about what is Glog Rat Kebab Edition.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's, just like I said, I needed to get the idea out of my head. It was bothering me being in there, and I had to like get it out. It was me reading Delicious in Dungeon, and I think it's some of the best piece of like fantasy fiction, like bar none, top 10 for me. And I was like, okay, how do I make a game about this? And so the this is just a hack. It's a hack of a hack. And there's a lot of this is another thing where you like see design space in the blogosphere get like passed around. Skirples at Coins and Scrolls had made monster like taste and like preparation entries for everything in the original monster manual. An incredible resource. So in the rat kabob hack, you gain different types of experience. You have experience like vitamins that will grow different parts of your character sheet, your attributes, your mana pool, your health, etc. And so the gimmick is you're like going around and getting monsters and making balanced meals so that your character is growing using this like weird XP system. So your character's growing the way that you want to. You have to get the cockatrice egg for the rich nutrients, and the minotaur beefsteak for the vitamins.
So good. It is literally, like I said, it's such a good example of unique world building also too, because it takes a classic trope of like you're gonna go down in a dungeon and it's just like, hey, what if you were poor and couldn't afford supplies, and what if you met a weird dwarf who also just cooked monsters as they found them, and there's some just real weird stuff that they eat, but also whenever you stop to think about the things that we eat in the real world, a lot of it's real weird. And so I'm just, like I said, I'm always super thrilled whenever I see anything that's connected to it, whenever I see somebody else who has done it, anything from it. And so like I was super immediately drawn to it. And like I said, I've only ever played GLOG when Sam has run stuff. And I'm always super thrilled whenever I get GLOGgy stuff put in front of me. So it was an article that I was very, very drawn to over the blog. But so let's talk a little bit about games. Charlie is like, says monster part eater here. Look, Charlie, you anytime you want to eat monsters together, ring me up. Come bring the monster parts to Philly and we'll eat them. You said you've designed in kind of all these different areas, but like I said, I kind of want to focus specifically on Underhill Bywater. If anybody has not gone to look at your itch page and seen some of the amazing stuff that's out there, I know His Majesty the Worm is like your most recent big really cool project, and we should talk about that, and you should pitch it and everybody should go support it, but I do want to talk about just a halfling travelogue game and the procedures that rose up around them, because I think travel sucks in probably every RPG. Like it's reduced to either just a random roll or like a lot of really weird, like the GM just doesn't know how to get you where you're going moments. And so they spend way too much time talking to you about all the things you see on the way. What kind of drew you to creating in that space?
Yeah. Great question. Thank you. So travel has always sucked, and it's something that so many GMs want to do. They're drawn to it. The big fantasy story, right, is all about walking across the big fantasy world and throwing a ring somewhere. And the GMs know that they had this incredible world in their head, and they want to get it onto paper and show people it, kind of like as they go on these journeys. But like you said, it almost always sucks. Either it's entirely hand waved, or like there's just like one vignette between A and B, and stuff happens, bandits attack, whatever. And I really felt that there was a better way. And so I wanted to like articulate what my problems were with travel, especially because there are some games out there that I otherwise like, Ryutama and The One Ring. And whenever somebody asks what is a good game for travel, these names are bandied about, and the conversation just kind of shuts down. There's no other like thoughtfulness about what makes travel fun at the table, or what they do well. But for those two instances, travel is very, very random, right? Like you're going somewhere and you roll some dice, and somebody in your party, the lookout man, sees something, and then they don't roll enough awareness, so they lose 5 hit points, and then you just keep going on. And I find myself very, very bored by those vignettes, even ones that are kind of cleverly written. So it's not enough just to complain about RPGs. You also have to like make the games that you want to play, and I want to play travel. So Underhill Bywater is a game about halflings not going on adventures. And its supplement, Walking Holiday, is my essay. It's a long form essay, right? About like how to make travel actually fun. And the big secret about any game, the thing that is fun about games, is choice. We like making choices. It pleases our brains. So, when you're at the table and RPGs are really cool because you can make so many different types of choices. But the GM has to present a journey that has meaningful points of decision for the players, and Walking Holiday just lays all of that out, like all the places and all the times that a GM can make cool decisions and interesting worlds. I tried to call that out so that you can have a better trip.
Awesome. So for people who haven't played this a little bit yet, tell us a little bit about what it looks like, how it works. You don't have to like run a session for me right here, but just give us a little bit of a taste of kind of what are some of those choices or an experience of play that you've had running the game.
Sure. So a lot of it is like GM facing. I think I would conceptualize it as 2 parts, right? There's both a procedure about like how you go from point to point. Choices that player facing choices like you can travel, you can forage, you can camp, all the things you do on a journey, and all of those have mechanical weight. And then there's the prep work that the GM does to design a map that is interesting to explore. That isn't just you failed a check and you lose some resource. And that is done with a dice drop table. So pick up a handful of dice, throw them on a piece of paper, draw little shapes around them, and look it up on a table, and you'll have automatically populated a fantastic world with giant hills and magical waterfalls and old ruins. And then there's a lot of suggestions for a GM to kind of talk through how these areas can be infused with interesting choices, and what's a lot of examples. And there's also just like space to like squiggle your pencil. Like all the game itself is on different PDF layers. So when you're ready to like make your own, instead of just using the examples that I gave you, turn off my text and like print out the book and write in the book, and then print it out and have it at the table.
I love that. And so I love that integration of digital tech also too, period. Like that's super smart, because everybody just flattens their stuff down to make it as easy to use as possible. But they lose that level of functionality in there. That's super cool. No, I like when we were looking at the shipboard rules. So we have Through the Void, which is like our sci-fi OSR game that's in development right now. It's really funny because this came out very clearly. Like we wanted ship rules to be simple and fit on basically up a half page, which we always do, right? But a big thing that when I was talking to people about like what's your favorite sci-fi ship rules, a lot of people focused on combat, and they were like, well, I really like that, like when there's something for everybody to do in combat, right? When I know I can do this or that or the other thing. And I think that's an incredibly important part of what makes ship rules good. But I was like, but what is it like the rest of the time? Like if I want a game where ostensibly the time of players, for the most part, like the safest place they're going to be or feel is on their ship, and I want their ship to feel like it's lived on. How do you do that in a way that's fun and exciting and enjoyable and lets them create the pursuits that they want to pursue? And there's all kinds of different approaches, narratively, all kinds of different pieces. But like one of the things that we did was make sure like, hey, here are like 8 things you could be doing at any given time on a ship that have some kind of mechanical heft that you could decide to do. And they might lead into other things, you know, and there's things that you can also, like there's modules you can add to your ship because that's how the ships work that might add different functionality. Like if you have a greenhouse, all of a sudden now you can raise plants on your ship, right? And not every ship is necessarily going to be good at that, but it's something that you can now say our ship does this, whereas before it didn't. And that's an important choice. But as we were like sharing it with people were like, oh, like, do we ever have to go to the station? And I was like, I mean, no, you never do. But like, for me, that was like, can we just keep on traveling forever? Yeah. I mean, you got to figure out fuel. But let's talk about that and supplies. But yeah, absolutely. Like other than touching down for that, it's a setting that like space is a setting that inherently suggest going somewhere in a way that almost no other type of setting does. And it was interesting to see that come out in just the very simple choices of just looking at players and GM and just saying like, here are always things you could be doing on a ship. And some of those things are like healing because you got hit like here, but here's how healing works on a ship specifically as opposed to if you're laying in dusty ruins, right?
Yes.
Or whatever else. And I'm always enthralled by the different kind of little pieces that someone drops in there and in the different ways they do things. But you know, like it really never occurred to me that what we were doing was also telling players and GMs like here are decisions you can make. And we even just got a piece back for it, and it's by Nora from Monkey Paw Games, and like I was reading through it, and I love when somebody gives me something back, and it's like here's the 90% the same format that you gave me and asked me to fill out. Also, I did this really weird thing in this 10% how, like, without even mentioning it, right? They basically made, instead of making a dungeon, made a point crawl, right? Like, but it's a dice drop point crawl. So it is like literally take a handful of D6 and throw them down and put circles around them in this empty space. And those are now this different parts of this spatial cloud system called the von Neumann cloud, right? Yeah, you're going to travel around in those instead of going into a dungeon this time, which I love because it implicitly meant, oh, sweet. That means they're going to spend a lot of time on their ship moving from place to place. And I love that. Like, I love that this is an adventure that somebody went in and synthesized the different options that there were in the rules and said, I'm going to take this in a different direction, and that travel explicitly was a part of that. So I think when we make those, like when we're able to create those choices, it immediately starts to spark things in other designers and players and GMs, and I love that. And so I also love the idea of this is just my long form essay, and I put it up on on itch for Walking Holiday also too, because it is, I think, such a great, like, something we don't see enough of, especially in the OSR scene, is like, I want to walk you through a way of thinking about this, and I want to do that in a game because of the emphasis on minimalist design or BX simulation, or for a lot of different reasons. We tend to not see people just saying, I'm going to take my long form thoughts, put procedures around them, and then represent them to you and say, what if you put this in your game? And so I really want to encourage people to go check it out. But let's talk a little bit about one of your other projects, and that is, well, I'm clicking around on everything now. Is it His Majesty the Worm?
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about His Majesty the Worm.
Sure. His Majesty the Worm is a game I've been working on for a long time. It is a tarot-based dungeon crawler. That is tarot-based because the tarot cards are your randomizers. There's no dice. And it's a game I've been playtesting for 5 or 6 years. I have been slow funding it on itch. So I've been putting out sample chapters to just get a little revenue coming so I can pay artists and editors. And I've been doing that for about 2 years. There are 4 sample chapters out right now. Most of them are pay what you want. And because of the success with the slow funding model, it is coming out this year. I'm very excited about it. It is finally crystallizing. and it should be fun.
Awesome. And it's there's also parts of other, like your Dungeon Seeds project came out of His Majesty the Worm, right? Like there's artist in chat, Charles Ferguson Avery wants everybody to know.
Yeah,
that
he
he's in chat.
he has contributed one of the chapter title spreads. Very cool piece of art.
There we go. And then Blake wants to know are you using the major arcana differently than to the minor cards? Like how are the arcana and the card types broken out?
Yeah, good question. I like cards a lot because they tarot cards especially because they have a lot of they're informationally rich. If you just draw a card in the tarot, not only does it have some art pieces, but it also has directionality, whether it's right side or inverted, the suit, the number, whether the number is even or odd. You can divide it up in all sorts of ways. So the GM has the major arcana, and they use that for the GM procedures, and the players have the minor arcana, and they use that for all the things that they do. So the two types of arcana are separated out from the deck and sit in different piles on the table.
Awesome. And let me ask you the question. So this has been I don't think is going to be a heartbreaker. Like you're making it happen. The game's coming out, but ostensibly this has been your major project for the last couple of years. Now, were you like, hey, I've got all these ideas for procedures, I want to rope them into a game, or were you like, hey, here's the game I want. Oh, now I need all these other procedures to support it. Like it probably may have been 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but what direction did you kind of travel?
Yeah, good question. I'm always writing the games that I want to play, right? So this was the game that I wanted to play with my friends. And a lot of it came out of feeling that the dungeon experience that I was getting elsewhere wasn't the dungeon experience I had always like pictured in my head when I read pulp fantasy. Things like flying and dark vision and incredibly like powerful de facto magical powers just robbed dungeons of a lot of their teeth. And nobody was tracking things like food. Nobody was tracking things like torches. And I felt so bad for these little subsystems that are physically printed in a lot of books and thrown out the window. So I wanted to make a game that like really, really like dug down into and elevated and centralized things that I think are interesting about dungeons. Being wet and alone and scared and hungry in a dark hole, and making that fun, not miserable, not a slog. It's not just like negatives, So the game is about like making these subsystems front and center. Your light has a lot of impact on the way that you move around and can like interact. Food is really important, kind of get back to the delicious and dungeon thing. Eating well is an important part for your character. Your character's relationships with each other called bonds power the healing mechanic in the game, so that like your friendship with your fellow adventurers is what makes you like able to even recover from the terrible injuries that the mythic underworld gives to you. So I was just making the game that I wanted to play and kind of elevating things that I hadn't seen elevated before.
Awesome. No, and I like for it's really funny. Like for when we were doing the development work for Down We Go, there would be a lot of those things that would come up, and like I would be like, so like because I am the OSR character who's like my inventory is the most important thing on my sheets. I don't give a anything else. And if you're gonna let me write weird things in my inventory, I'm absolutely gonna write weird things in my inventory that I don't know what are. But I am also always going to have in my inventory food, water, some source of light, and blessed salt. Like those items, regardless of my limitations, are the things that are always going in my inventory, because I assume if we're going down in a dungeon and we're playing an OSR system, that those things should matter at some point in time. And other than the blessed salt, they almost never do, which is really weird because it's like the one outlier of like, yeah, like why would you need that one? But it's the only one that ever comes up in play that GMs regularly ask about. Maybe source of light next, food and water almost never. It's just kind of assumed. And so like I love that stuff. I dig on that stuff. I love to I want to make sure that I have that stuff with me. And if they don't ever ask for it, then I'm just flecking that apart and throwing food at monsters. It's great. But I love kind of seeing some of those things come up. And like, even when we were talking about light, I was like, so how do you want people to handle light? And down we go to Marcus, and he was like, I don't care about light, so I don't want to write light rules. I was like, this is not a slam on Marcus. I love you. You know that.
Yes.
We've made a great game together. But like we ended up saying like, man, keeping track of time kind of sucks, especially in more narratively oriented dungeons. So like most of our, and does this make sense logically? No, but does it make sense in the way that we typically see the game played? Yes. Most of our light sources are tracked by room you are exploring. And so every time you move into a new room, the assumption is time has passed, things tick down. And if you take extra time to do something, when I run it, though, it will tick down as if you had gone to a new room, because you're like, we're just going to hang out here for a long time. Great. We're going to tick that down one. But it's really interesting to think about some of the ways that those get mechanized, depending on how much you want to flesh into them. But I love the thought of like the intentionality behind this. The first thing I ever saw for His Majesty the Worm, and because of the branding that we have, as well as things I am actually interested in, is the Name This Alchemical book. And so like it was the first time I think your work caught my eye, explicitly, because if somebody releases an alchemy supplement, I'm going to get it and I'm going to read it, because I always want to know what people will do with it. I cut my teeth on GURPS, and GURPS has a pretty decent approach to alchemy from a Vancian generic fantasy background system, right? You can go super esoteric with it as a source of knowledge, but it's also like, here's a list of like 50 potions in the core book and a bunch of suggested ingredients for how they might work. And we also have things like skills for harvesting mana organs out of creatures, if you want to get into that, and you can use Into the Weird and Wild by Charlie Ferguson Avery to figure out what those looting tables look like. But tell me a little bit, tell our audience a little bit about your approach, and Name This Alchemical book, which is tremendous. Like the whole presentation of the book itself is great. But tell us a little bit about the alchemy approach that it got integrated.
Oh yeah, cheers. So Name This Alchemical book is the alchemical chapter from His Majesty the Worm. By default in like vanilla His Majesty the Worm, you get alchemy is just stealing monsters' powers. So as a GM, when you're creating monsters you kind of just make it the way you make a cocktail, right? You mix things together. The monster has moves, and if a player successfully vanquishes the monster and takes their weird guts and brews them with potion, they get the monster's power. And I feel really good about alchemy having robust, powerful uses because they are one-use items. I'm not worried in the same way that I am about, like, if I include a light spell, will anybody ever use torches? You can, kill and dethrone and devour God, and you can use his powers. And with the Name This Alchemical book, I didn't want to just put out just one of the chapters from His Majesty the Worm, because I am eventually going to publish that book, and I wanted people to be excited about the things they were getting now. So I made several variants of different types of alchemy. Some based on herbs, some based on cooking, to just do another delicious and dungeon thing. And I put them all into the book in different layers. And so when you open the book, it's a white page and there are integrated PDF buttons. And when you click one of the buttons, you are randomly given a different alchemical system than it is cobbled together based on some logic that I programmed into the PDF. So like there are several systems there. And I think that a lot of people have honestly downloaded and bought the book and didn't know that there is other systems hidden amongst the pages.
Yeah. No, I definitely messed around with it for a while because I was enthralled by that piece of, again, of design tech that I don't see people think super intentionally about that piece of their design process a lot of the time. And I absolutely love it. Blake Ryan wants to know, can the characters have nightmares about becoming the creatures they are harvesting? I would never restrict that player choice, but mechanically, narratively, do you restrict that choice in the text? Is it rules as written that they can or cannot have nightmares?
No rules is written specifically about that.
So let people dream or away or not as you prefer at your table. But I do love the like Mega Man-esque aspect of defeat this monster. And again, like I am 100% that weird player who's like, oh, those monkeys could climb on the wall due to these weird pads on their foot. Yeah, I'm chopping those pads off. Like I'm going to mash those up later and drink them. And I love that you've literally just made it that easy in the system to be like, yeah, that's how it works. Instead of because for me, if you want to play an alchemist and play, which I don't think enough people do, but I do, because I'm the weirdo who likes to cut animals up and drink their bodies. I think you're putting a lot of player time into, like, if somebody's like, I just want to play an alchemist and I just want to be able to sling potions, depending on the system, that's fine. When I say I want to play an alchemist, I say I want to narratively poke at a million different things and have to stop on a regular basis to brew stuff up and to sit by the fireside while everybody else is sharpening their tools and tell you how I'm combining weird things together, right? Like that is 100% the type of stuff that I like to do as a player, and it's what drives me. And almost no systems give space to say how do you choose to interact with the physical world around you. And Nandis Alchemical book does a really good job in a very simple way. Like you don't have to do all that weird stuff that I was just talking about, but it encourages you to poke around at the weird things you encounter in a way that I deeply, deeply love. So, I know you've got a hard deadline coming up, and we're coming up on that time also, too. It's been great to have you on. We need to get you on sometime to actually play one of your games, to do some traveloguing, to do something else. But before we go, JP has a question in the chat. It might be too in the weeds of a question, but what program do you use to make your interactive PDFs?
Good question. I have Adobe InDesign, but I think that you can do it just with like Adobe Acrobat. I have on my blog under Name This Alchemical Book is the name of the blog article, and I describe how to do it. I lay out that functionality so that you can do it too.
Awesome. And so head on over to the blog, which is right below just name. If people want to follow more of your work, you've got the blog, you've got your itch page where they can check stuff out. Is there other great places for them to find or follow the work you do?
You can always follow me on Twitter, also Rise Up Comus. And if you are, if His Majesty the Worm sounds interesting to you, please do go to my itch page and sign up for my mailing list. I will only mail you to tell you that it is out, which will be sometime this year.
But what if I want more mail from you? How do I access that?
Tony, I'll send you. You can be my pen pal.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to the new pen pal game we're going to write together over the course of those missives. Josh, it's been so good to have you on with us. Like I said, we need to get you back on sometime to play, to hang out, to spend some more time together. I really appreciate you taking this time out of your day just to sit down and talk about travelogues and weird little subsystems and apparently our favorite mangas with each other. And I can't wait till we get a chance to do it again. This has been Prestige Class with Josh, and until next time, class is dismissed. Oh, hold on. Eric just over asked, and we'll let you do one last pitch. Any plans to bring any of your games to print? That is, His Majesty the Worm is going to print this year, correct?
That is my plan.
So you want to go to riseupcomus.itch.io/His Majesty the Worm with hyphens in it. Just go to the itch page down below us all. It's linked in the chat over on YouTube. Click on it and click to get notified when it is going to print, and all those things will be up. That also, Eric may have asked that question. YouTube takes way longer than everything else to give me information, so Eric may have asked that question before we answered it. But thanks so much to everybody for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.